This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian. It's a cliche to say it at this point, but COVID-19 is that rare sort of event that's affected the entire world. Given how easy it was before the pandemic to just hop on a plane and cross international borders, it's not surprising that it spread as quickly as it did. In fact, it was just a few weeks after Chinese authorities first identified the virus back in January that cases began to appear in Thailand and the United States. Before we knew it, there were few places on the entire globe where you could go and be 100% safe. But the way this played out in the months that followed has, of course, been wildly different depending upon where you are. If your country or region did a fairly good job containing the virus, and people followed all the social distancing rules they were supposed to, it's quite possible that the impact on you and the people around you might not have seemed all that bad. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., well, I don't need to tell you how bad the situation continues to be in much of this country. Of course, your experience of the pandemic has probably been influenced by lots of other factors as well, like whether you live in a city or a more rural area, and whether you yourself lost your job or experienced financial hardship as a result of all this. I wanted to get a sense of the wide range of what it's been like for my friends around the world, so I reached out to a bunch of them recently and said, hey, I know things are kind of crazy right now in terms of the virus. Send me a short recording describing what's going on where you live and in your life. The responses they sent me were eye-opening, so today I'm beginning an occasional series on Far From Home where I'll share with you some of what they told me. But I actually want to begin by sharing a recording from my colleague Neil Sandell, who's a Canadian radio producer now living in France. Way back in March, which I know seems like a lifetime ago now, he made an audio diary entry when the mandatory home confinement in his city first went into effect. And it was that recording that partially helped inspire this project I'm launching today. Listening back to it at this point is sort of like digging up a time capsule from that initial moment when many of the changes we now take for granted still seemed really strange and unimaginable. Here's Neil.
So, this is my new normal. I wash my hands a dozen times a day, probably more. I scrub obsessively. I scrub hoping it will make a difference. I don't pray to a god, but I pray soap and water will ward off this virus. I pray it will keep me safe. This is my new normal, but what I'm discovering is that what's normal keeps changing. Like last Tuesday, when the full lockdown came into force in France. I live in Nice on the Mediterranean, where springtime has arrived. Around noon hour, I was out on the terrace of our apartment, just admiring the flowers. And then, that was it. That was the midday cannon. In Nice, every day at noon hour, there's been a cannon that fires. Rain or shine, no matter what the season. It's been going on since 1861. And today's cannon marks the beginning of the lockdown here and in France, everywhere in France. I'm on our back terrace. It faces out into a courtyard of other buildings. It's really beautiful here. All of the flowers that are coming into bloom. Bees pollinating the flowers and new growth everywhere. We bought an olive tree in memorial for Donna's father, who died this at Christmas, and it's sprouting new leaves. It's a hopeful sign. Gotta keep the hope up. Gotta hope for the best. Later that day, City Hall announced the cannon would fall silent until further notice. it was not an essential service. So, another new normal to get used to. Silence. Or so I thought. But then the next day, it was around noon, my wife called me from another room. "Come quick!" She had flung open the doors to the terrace. "Listen," she said. The bells and the birds. In these dark days, I take my hope anywhere I can find it.
We'll hear more from Neil Sandell later in the show. Here now are some of the recordings I received from my other friends and colleagues around the world.
My name is Daniel Tilias. I am a community organizer in Cité Soleil in Haiti. I could never imagine that there could be something that kind of like locked down everyone, both like the marginalized as the wealthy people of the country. It was not about like your wealth, it was not about your color. At some point, it's something that kind of like put everyone at the same level, and it's something that I would never imagine would happen in Haiti like this.
Que também estava de moto na rodovia, foi atingido por carro e não resistiu.
Hi Scott, my name is Alisson Prestes. I'm a software developer here in Brazil. That's my dog. I have 2 dogs and 7 cats. I hope they stop barking, sorry. I am in the risk group. I have diabetes and I haven't seen my friends in a while. I used to go out with my friends to restaurants, bars and cafes a few times during the week, and every weekend I used to meet my friends. But since the pandemic started, I'm staying at home. People are not respecting this social distancing restrictions, so I'm very, very afraid to go out. We have like 100 new cases sharing my city each day for the last few days, and we don't have the infrastructure to deal with this, and that's very alarming. So what I'm trying to do to have some exercises and to see some friends without too much risk, I started cycling again. So I have a bike. I'm trying to cycle with my friends. That's a good way to see them because we don't get too close to each other, and we do some exercises.
My name is Oriana, and I'm making this recording from the UK. Thanks to COVID-19, today by noon, I would know if I have a job or not. A job I've been doing for 22 years, a job I love. What I miss most is my husband. I have not seen him since 22nd February. He's in Miami. 6 months ago, I had an almost perfect life, traveling the world. I never would have believed this would happen. Not seeing my husband, not working, not traveling, not socializing, and the list goes on. I often ask myself the same question: how did we get here?
My name is Pablo. I am 26 years old. I am from Peru. I am a sociology graduate and currently I am unemployed. I used to live in Lima, the capital of Peru, but I was not able to find a job as a sociologist, and with the pandemic it became even more difficult. I was afraid that I could not afford my room anymore with my savings. I had to come back to my hometown Trujillo when the quarantine started. I got to catch a bus, the last day that national travel was allowed, and in the beginning I thought just maybe for a few days, but now it's been almost half a year.
I'm Jo. I'm the mother of a Kiwi New Zealand family living in Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East. 168 days ago, our schools became isolated from the rest of the community. 161 days ago, they shut entirely and all learning moved online. 2 weeks after that, the city closed entirely and all work became remote from home. If you managed to keep your job at all, obviously different sectors were affected differently. Most, like us, took an immediate effect salary cut, but you do what you need to do to be able to keep your jobs. We had 1 month where we couldn't leave the house at all, even to exercise, except for essential business, which included emergency visits to the hospitals or your groceries. We had at least 2 months of nighttime curfews while the country did a full sanitisation process. We're now gradually reopening. Pools, restaurants, shops are all operating. We now have 4 public beaches that are open again. You have to book your slot. They, like everywhere else, is only operating at a certain capacity.
This is Alex from Japan. I live in Yokohama, but I am currently in Chiba at the seaside at the Pacific Ocean, as you can probably hear. A big difference that has to be mentioned is that Japan has the culture of social distance by default, and also the culture of wearing masks due to the consciousness of getting infected and infecting others during flu season, but also people wear masks during pollen season because lots of Japanese are allergic to pollen. There were a lot of challenges for people to work from home, remote work. In the rest of the world, or at least in Europe or in the States, it's pretty standard already. But in Japan, the structures are not there, I feel. People didn't know what work from home is, and it was completely new for them.
As you may have heard, the situation in Haiti is COVID has not hit as bad as other countries has, but should understand that the country has not had like a real campaign of tests because of the costs associated with the tests. So people were just doing their normal routine. There has been a confinement situation for a while, but people have not really followed the guidelines. And the most surprising part of this for me is that we didn't learn enough of this. I think it was an opportunity, just like the earthquake was, for all Haitians to take the lesson, but I don't think that we did.
I feel very frustrated and anxious whenever I go out. I used to be an anxious person, and now with the pandemic, I think anxiety is even worse. I see more carelessness and irresponsibility with the social distancing and mask wearing recommendation. I understand that most people are tired, but we can't stop the fight against the pandemic now.
In Japan, the emergency lockdown got lifted, and all of a sudden everything, it felt like, went back to normal. But a lot of people are struggling still. The governor of Tokyo, she's sending out the daily infection numbers, and second wave, yes or no, it's a little bit difficult to say, but it has gotten worse over the last couple of weeks.
Abu Dhabi remains isolated from the rest of the country and the world. A negative test is required to enter. Permits are required to leave and re-enter the country, if in fact you can find a flight. Schools are planning to reopen on the 30th of August. You need a tracking app, a negative test, masks, social distancing, strict protocols in place for that to become possible. Online learning still will be available for those that are immune compromised or just uncomfortable putting their children in that situation. We still have a decree in place where there are no gatherings over 5 people unless first-degree relatives. So expats are at a distinct disadvantage in that most of us don't have first-degree relatives living in our country of residence. The fines in place for breaking any of these decrees for our mask wearings or gatherings and things like that are huge. So we have no option but to just keep being like this for however long.
I cannot say that I'm fully happy to be here, but it definitely makes me feel safer than staying by myself. Still, I am very conscious of my privilege as a middle-class man. Over 70% of employment in Peru is informal. That means that these workers do not have permanent access to good health care and benefits. Disadvantaged people have organized in ollas comunes, soup kitchens in English. The many low-income families in Lima also have to face the very humid winter in poor housing conditions, with houses made of cardboard, plastic, and remains of wood. So, actually, the pandemic has resurfaced the long-time inequalities that we have always had during the last decades.
People in Brazil, they don't have savings like to live 1 month without working. So people are more afraid of losing their jobs than of dying of COVID. People normalize the depths of COVID. Lots of people say that we shouldn't be worrying that much about COVID, that people will die and that's it. There's nothing to do about it.
For the Japanese, I think it's about not really knowing how the government deals with this pandemic. You know, testing is not as widespread as compared to neighboring South Korea, who's been dealing with it really well, I feel. But if I compare it to the United States or to my European friends or even Southeast Asia, it's not as restricted. And yes, partly I'm happy about it, but also it's kind of worrying because it's like, why doesn't the government just say, okay, please stay home, otherwise you get fined, and then people stay home and then the numbers go down? But I think they're just too scared about the economy just tanks and the government gets blamed. And so I think they're more concerned about the short-term gains for their own rather than the long-term good of the nation, I'm afraid.
I'm still afraid because people don't believe that the virus is real and they still expose themselves. And to me, it's a big risk to take. Now it's like the country is open like for business again, no more confinement. There are planes coming from all over the world, like landing in Haiti. It's a real threat. And I hope that the government can do something about this.
We've got an index temperature of 57 degrees in the Middle East at the moment, and I googled that, so that's 134 Fahrenheit for your American listeners. We're really lucky in that we've got a very small plunge pool in our garden, and we are doing our level best to keep sane and busy, working as normal, keeping our routines in place. But 5 months sequestered, just the 3 of us, it's taking its toll.
Things are definitely not normal anymore. 2 gentlemen in my apartment complex died of COVID-19. This was very sad, because I knew one of them pretty well. This experience has humbled me. I cannot take things for granted anymore. Every day is special, any achievement is great, planning ahead, forecasting has become very difficult. Yesterday was a bad day for me. I felt very agitated. This is because I'm waiting on news from my company regarding my job. I had to make an effort not to take it out on my mom. I've been my 85-year-old mother's carer until I go back to work. This has given us a chance to spend quality time together. I've also spent quality time with my beautiful grandchildren. Also, I feel healthier as I've been exercising and eating healthy. I guess with every bad situation has something positive.
Our lives have changed a lot, I know. I miss my friends a lot. I miss my old life before. But I'm not going to lose hope that we're going to overcome this.
Thanks so much to Pablo from Peru, as well as Daniel from Haiti, Allison from Brazil, Joe from Abu Dhabi, Alex from Japan, and Oriana in the UK. By the way, in case you were wondering, the reason Oriana was waiting to hear back about her job was because she's a flight attendant, and of course few people are traveling nowadays. Thankfully, a few hours after she made her recording, she was relieved to find out that her job is safe, at least for the time being. As Neil Sandell said at the beginning of this show, in these dark times we could all use some signs of hope. So before I leave you, I wanted to play another audio diary he recorded from his home in southern France back in the spring. It was on day 51 of France's lockdown, when the quarantine restrictions were finally lifted.
Okay, I'm just going to take off my mask so I can speak a little bit more clearly, gingerly. There we go. Oh, fresh mown grass. Oh God, it's an intoxicating smell. Fresh mown grass. Oh. So I'm looking out on the park that is across the street from us. It's a huge park. It occupies a full city block. And for the last 8 weeks, it's been closed, shut down in the lockdown. The grass has gone to seed. It's quite high. There are weeds and dandelions and marguerites blooming everywhere. Clover. It looks a little bit wild. And so they're now mowing the grass. It's a sign that this park is going to come back to life after 8 weeks in a slumber. This is in anticipation of the end of the lockdown. Today is Wednesday. The lockdown will end apparently on Sunday night, and the city is slowly springing back to life. And it's a welcome thing. It's been strange looking out at this park every day, and it's been so dormant, so quiet. Usually there'd be children running around in the park. The city has been quiet, and in some ways it's been a revelation. You with no traffic, with no construction noise, with no low-level din, you hear the bird song, and you can hear yourself think. You hear your neighbors a little bit more, what music they're playing, sometimes not the best, what music they're practicing, sometimes not the best piano players, but you hear things differently. And so this sound of lawn mowing it's a revelation, and it's a delight. Sounds of the city waking up again and being reborn. Sniff that air. It's sweet.
I checked in with Neil the other day to see how he's doing. He told me he's been riding his bicycle a lot and that his anxiety has diminished as France has reduced the spread of the virus. But now, as cases are rising again, he's starting to get nervous. Many people have let their guards down and are no longer wearing masks or social distancing like they should, he said. And the influx of summer tourists has made the problem in his city start to get worse. Thanks so much to Neil for letting me use his recordings. If you want to hear more of his work, I've linked to his SoundCloud page from my website, farfromhomepodcast.org. Thanks as well to the Rumble Strip podcast, which also helped inspire this episode with their recent Our Show series. It's worth a listen, so I encourage you to go check out Rumble Strip wherever you listen to this podcast. As I said, I'm hoping to make this an occasional series where I'll feature more stories and thoughts on COVID-19 from around the world. So if you're living somewhere far away from me here in New Jersey and you have a unique perspective or experience you want to share about what's going on where you are or in your life, I'd really love to hear from you. Please drop me a line at info@farfromhomepodcast.org and I'll send you some instructions on what I'm looking for and how to send me your audio file. If you want to keep up with the show, you could follow Far From Home on Instagram or Facebook and follow me on Twitter. I'm @ScottGurian. Thanks to Katie McGee for editorial assistance and Alex Lewis for technical support. My show's logo comes from Polemic, which designs award-winning experiences all over the world at the intersection of culture, commerce, and community. Find out how they could help your business at polemicdesign.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for listening.